Hello, my name is Joseph Christos Thrice. My birth name is Joe Stanley, and this is part 5 in a video series basically outlining all evil, conspiracy, and corruption in the world, and hopefully unveiling enough of it so that we can get back to a raw, pure version of the love that we want to have expressed in the world. And I'll kind of just leave it at that. This will go into TV, movies, and film, and that can go to social media, that can go to like YouTube, basically wherever you see someone on a screen, basically. Um, so the last part of the series kind of dealt with music and kind of a master key. Outlining certain terms that kind of have some communication um, and have a multi-layered kind of meaning to it that's intended. Um, some people are born to know it, born into something, known as insiders or whatever you want to call it. Others find out later. I don't know if everyone in the world finds out this stuff, but I would imagine to some degree they obviously do. So just a little disclaimer. The topics discussed in this will range from supernatural to futuristic to the impossible. I'm only speculating as to the nature of synthetic telepathy, hive mind technology, the matrix, aka routing patterns of the digital supercomputers that run the country, society, and world, mind control and mind control torture, the reality of the Nazi-esque surveillance state and Nazi-esque self-policing citizen society, the circumstances of how these factors are set up politically and how their hierarchies operate, and lastly, how chaotic and volatile the modern world is. This extends to a society and public that is forced to and embraces hiding a depopulation program that takes a percentage of the lives that make up suicide, homicide, and general deaths in the population, and most likely a majority of mass shooters, which they not only help create, but enjoy hunting and torturing, and a culture that reflects this hidden in plain sight. As I said, this is in our music, this is in our movies and TV, this is in pretty much all of our culture. Probably goes back to ancient times for a lot of this stuff, and the gatekeepers that existed back then, and the elite and ruling class that existed then, and kind of has shaped our way to the modern day. And if anyone looks at history in the United States, at least, and how we got to the United States, once we got to the 60s and the civil rights, things pretty much down spiraled and got pretty crazy fast, and this unbalanced duality that we're all refusing to acknowledge kind of got out of whack. And right around the 2000s, 2010s, we kind of course corrected, and cleaned everything up, as to say, or as to speak to. So as we're doing that, these things are still just as toxic. We're living in a more evil world than we did in the 80s and 90s. It's just better hidden. And same with all these evil things that are done by secret societies, and these messages that are hidden, all that kind of stuff. And basically, so you have a loving world that wants to protect people and all that, but if you do not want to embrace their view of the world and how to handle this knowledge or divine knowledge, any of these kind of things, then you are left to be tortured. A lot of people in the population are made to be, sacrificed for ritual, or, they're just kind of loner types. And so, with that in consideration, I went to the subliminal messages on how they have scapegoat rituals, Christ rituals, basically redoing the crucifixion, and doing this to thousands of people, having kind of like a personal Jesus that people use and kill and stuff like that, and torture. And then we have like same kind of concept with a Virgin Mary kind of ritual, where you have like people who are very pure, who don't want to live in this world as it is, kind of torturing people and everything. Um, and there's a lot more to that, whether it's rituals or initiations. And a good part of it for people who are born into it. Otherwise, some of it they find by word of mouth because that's the only way these people find this stuff. But like I said, it's in the TVs, film, and music, and the culture, whether it be in catchphrases or the language in some form or another. And right alongside that, there's a lot of beauty in the world, a lot of beauty because of this language, this Twilight language, this sub language, sub communication. Who knows how far it goes back, 1700s to ancient times, as I said. But the other side of that, this duality that's probably always been out of whack in the espionage that goes with it and the service of these secret societies or anyone otherwise, it takes this evil turn. So basically, the other side of that is we have, these con artists, if you can call it, in simpler terms, softer language, con artists that surround the truth with fire to supposedly protect it from harm's way and to protect society. But really, what it's doing is causing harm to anyone that would take this truth, pretty much power and knowledge of the truth, away from any of those people. So they can only, they can't shape the narrative beyond what the ruling class and these secret societies that hold it up want to. And the evil that they say they're guarding it from, or people from that they're guarding it from, is in fact the evil that they are participating in actively themselves. And they try to call it duty or duality or loyalty. It's just not the case. There is protection in the world, and there's a lot of people kind of guarding that and safeguarding that. But at the end of the day, we're talking about truly awful things done by millions of people and causing harm to millions of people. And that's not right, and that's not something that should be hidden. And like I said, I hope to give a little more balance to the duality of the world, and hopefully if we shine a light on the shadows in the world or shine a light in the darkness in the world, we can get to that place that we all want to become, that we all want to get to. Sorry, just reading here. There's basically digital systems, now AI, who knows how far that goes back, and neuro-linguistic programming to understand, control, translate, modify, or code certain terms, practices, teachings, language, industries, businesses, context, and that could be, in business or technology, or a cover-up version that would make, like for this torture and these simulations that kind of manipulate space and time, causing a lot of people to have a lot of awful symptoms, or in test subjects of torture victims, or anyone really. You never know how many people are not saying what they want to say on how it's affected them because they want to remain safe. But it can cause schizophrenia, psychosis, and bipolar. And there are actually programs that do that hand in hand with the, drugs, whether it be, acid or mushrooms or these designer drugs, if you want to call it that. There's even more sinister ones, sinister context for this, where it could be command and enslavement programming, covert psyop versions of these that are pretty much to interrogate. Like I said, like this Twilight language concept and this intended language that can connect history, culture, spirituality, and religion. And then, like I said, some of this intended sublanguage is to kind of digify or make hybrid humans. And so you learn, there's a lot of catchphrases and words, and they all have opposite meanings or multiple meanings. So you learn how to plug those different meanings in different contexts, and your ear will actually hear different things, and you're programmed to do that. But you also, once you recognize it, you can hear them in different contexts, um, and these matrices or supercomputers kind of route them for better understanding. But yeah, this coding is mainly used by AI and computers, but also people in the form of chaos agents, civilian spies or soldiers for espionage, the government, as I said, digital humans, human hybrids, AI humans, for the hive mind technology, um, clandestine, stealth, covert concepts, and obviously, like I said, subliminal messages for all these, and all these things are used to pass data or information, and sometimes it's sensitive data, or sometimes it's just to pass the message along so that they can then understand stuff in multiple ways. And so, like I said, a lot of these people who are kind of gatekeepers, they have a sense of entitlement. They feel like they're the elite. Um, they're used, from the military to, any secret society stuff, um, the government, all public figures, people who are higher prestige, if you want to call it that. Um, and so even if you're not, part of that, you're connected to it. And so that what comes with that is status and economic wealth, money, perks. Um, and there's kind of an honor associated with this, but it's kind of really a false honor and integrity that is put into you psychologically and programmed into you. And a lot of these companies will have NDAs, which is a non-disclosure agreement, really getting into the technology and how far this extends and how far it breaches freedom and it breaches privacy. And people can have thoughts kind of hacked, and you don't have privacy of thoughts. That's kind of like, 2012, we kind of let all these companies have our data and our cookies and all this kind of stuff like that. And so, this was just stepping stones for all the people that run the world. And so, like anybody who knows, they know that they have access to our thoughts, personality databases, and pretty much anything they want. Literally anything that they want. So, um, so as I said about the rituals, could be a scapegoat ritual, a Christ crucifixion, a Virgin Mary ritual, just death rituals, torture rituals, um, initiations for a lot of them. Like I said, just kind of reshaping that. Uh, just saying that again. So basically, a lot of these things within music and in TVs and movies, they basically open up portals, gates, gateways, or maps to understand, like I said, all these different things. And, if you're wired into it for long enough, it's obviously going to cause you um, cognitive harm. It's going to give you mental illness in certain cases. Um, and if you do not obey with these kind of rules and the system that's in place, it's going to be used to torture and kill you past this. And this is something personally I have experienced, and I am lucky to have my life to this day. And I'm currently in 24/7 torture, and I'm turning my house into a gas chamber with literally hundreds of chemical agents and gases and direct energy that I'm currently being hit with right now. And microwave weapons and all sorts of non-touch remote weapons. And that doesn't get into the experience that you have in your consciousness with the subliminal messages and basically people being able to pretty much wire your brain and hack your brain and hack your body through biohacking and bioengineering. Excuse me. And just purely evil stuff. So I may seem calm and collected, but it's It's taken me almost a month to get all of this together since my last video, so it goes to show you how much they will try and stop you. And this is with all the information I had ready at the will. So the only thing getting me by is pure willpower. Um, just complete devastation and hopelessness in my life to get better. I get tortured in hospitals every time I go in there. They have stopped giving me medicine, my medication that I need to live. I haven't had an inhaler in over 6 months. And this is from the actual hospitals, this is from the actual pharmacies. And this shows how they corrupt everyone on every part of the system. And this is truly evil stuff that we need to speak out against. And I hope my life gets better. But I went into the FBI months ago, and they basically blasted me with direct energy weapons and microwaves for the first 15 minutes I was in there before they even spoke to me. And I kind of used this sub-communication to get my message across, and then my torture got way worse. So just shows that the government will do anything to not help you, and try and neutralize you, quote unquote, and get you out of the picture, rather than having a 5-minute conversation or me doing what I did to try and kind of even take that off the table so that people could just help me, and the government can say, hey, don't bother this person anymore, take off these marching orders. But it just goes to show the lack of empathy and the lack of humanity that is in the government and the military, and that trickles down to all the people. And if you look at our culture and all the evil things on the sub level and the subconscious level, it really paints a picture. So once again, so Hollywood is an extension of the government, military, and espionage in the country in many ways. Works in multiple layers, have a multifaceted system, and also aligns with the government and military for subliminal messaging and subcommunication. And as I said, trains spies, soldiers, if you want to call them that, in the modern public for hive mind programming. Probably been doing this from any time in the 1900s on. It's used to discipline, punish, and torture the population, and also to torture and kill, as well as training insiders to interrogate, torture, and sadly as a form of their entertainment as they're doing this programming. And they do this to innocent civilians, and they're doing it to train and sharpen their 4D and psychological mind control skills as well. So once again, talking about pure evil, torturing innocent people and claiming it's so that you can get better psychological skills within 4D manipulation and space and time manipulation and exploring space, which once again connects all the way to like NASA and all these private sector and defense companies. In many cases, torturing until suicide, homicide, or death if they're commanded to do so, or like I said, given marching orders. So basically Hollywood, it's not just TV and movies and film. Like I said, it goes to the music, as I mentioned before, the internet, forums, any websites, social media, news, all use the same training and skills to turn virtually anything into a show, quote unquote. And of course there's show business, and thus you'll hear the term the biggest or the grandest stage of them all, and that's obviously the world. So it's basically making a show out of the world. This government control can be kind of structured with the royalty that comes with it, the high status, the elite. A lot of liberals will use kind of like a red costume, quote unquote, like a Republican costume, loyal to this, and use Republicans or the red color, associated with that to camouflage into this, as well as the liberals getting control of everything, kind of minus the government and military operations, though they do own most corporations now. So, in a manner of speaking, all liberals are part of and service the Republic of the United States, and in turn, the Republic allows the liberal dominance. It's unsure if the matrices and supercomputers are liberally run, or if they're republicly run, or it's just a combination of the two, or it's government run, and that kind of trickles down. However, um, but yeah, a lot of it is liberal supremacy or democratic supremacy or government supremacy. A lot of Republicans have lost their culture or the patriotism, yet they're all given this new modern way of patriotism, which kind of includes liberals and Republicans. Trying not to make it too political, but just kind of outlining that. This will pretty much include matters of economy, balance, order, and, like I said, marching orders. Once again, like they push a lot of this red versus blue, heel or bad guy versus a good guy, and a dynamic like this to hide or camouflage all evil or negative aspects of government and create a more happy, cleaner, or positive looking narrative that also gives an illusion of progress. There's basically a lot of things that we could create progress for very quickly and evolve very quickly, but this kind of stops it and kind of tracks it to a certain narrative. It also, trains Republicans to be more kind of purple, being a combination of liberal and Republican. And a lot of the purple people, they're actually hunted down or find themselves as subjects of the torture and killing and are subjects. Um, I kind of align with that. I grew up in the mainstream and as a liberal, but I do have Republican views or things that I agree with them. I think a lot of people, vote independent. As we know, 50 to 60% of the population usually votes, and before past 10 years, it was definitely 50% or lower. Um, so yeah, just kind of stating that only half of the percentage of the people that live in this country don't vote. So they might care about certain stuff, but they don't care because they know it's kind of a joke, or they don't care enough, or whatever the reason it might be. And a lot of these people might be insiders or be working with the government. So once again, um, so just kind of like going over a little bit of facts. The red carpet and the velvet rope kind of goes hand in hand with you know um, when they're going to have a movie and they're going to be showing it off, and you walk down the red carpet with velvet rope. Also used outside of clubs and all that kind of stuff. Both of this is for the royalty associated with it, and the red is the color used for it. Velvet is supposed to be exceptionally smooth, luxurious, kind of symbolizes profits. Um, can be charm, it can be richness or richness and texture. Um, like I said, like these velvet robes are basically outside clubs to promote and can make people be more likely into buying into an image or to increase demand or status. Um, in these long lines outside of clubs, they start as basically a manufactured or artificial line, but then become real after time as they gain interest and success. And a lot of these kind of things originated in the 1920s and kind of escalated to modern day. So, like Hollywood, we have a lot of manufactured exclusivity as a strategy, and it builds demand. And it also separates the chosen from those on the outside, or the elite from the general public. And also mimics insiders and those in charge from those who don't even know what's going on, or from the ones that do not, who are not in charge. and this occurs even in cities or small towns. Um, so yeah, um, reference, showing how we take culture from ancient times or whatnot and kind of pay homage to it. On the lighter side of things, there's a play titled, I'm going to butcher the name of it, Iganaman, by Aeschyles. Aeschyles. A, yeah, I just completely butchered that, but Aeschyles. Um, Basically, it's a play from 458 BC, and in this play, it kind of symbolized the Crimson Path and the returning of a king. And a quote in it basically is, "Only gods walk on such luxury." So we're kind of taking this whole thing from like masters, it could be like master masons or, grand masters or anything like that associated with that side of things, and kind of gods, um, which in modern day sees it in a different way. But back in ancient times, they had jealous gods, angry gods, gods for a lot of stuff, and it's kind of that echoed in the same way, whether it's in Hollywood or culture or likewise. Um, Kind of going. Um, let's see. Once again, Scarlet Dye. Once again, red. It was very expensive also, and this would mark for royal power, elite, godlike status, playing acting like gods, as well as like blood, and this could be like bloodlines. Coat of arms shows itself as many ways. Divinity, high rank, power, wealth, privilege, and entitlement, which a lot of these people, even up to now, are brought up with this entitlement, which is why you'll see such aggressive attitudes about it. Um, this, honestly, like this kind of aggressive entitlement, all this stuff alongside this, with like this out of balance duality, it's pretty much everyone's true face under their mask, or at least where their loyalty is. And thus, we live in a time still of bloodlines, family ties, arrogance, pure evil, and it's akin to medieval times or even before that. And the entitlement and barbaric nature that existed back then, and that came from that. Um, so, like I said, a lot of thing with the politics. Um, they say about the resistance or fighting the establishment. Resistance is part of the show. It is part of the illusion. Resistance is part of the establishment. It is part of the power, the power structure. So just kind of like showing a couple kind of connections within the culture over time. Um, you had Gloria Steinem, who was attached to feminism in the 1950s and kind of catapulted, what became the civil rights. Um, she did work with the Independent Research Services, which was CIA funded, and also this extended, to civil rights groups, cultural front groups, political groups, student organizations, magazines, um, in the civil rights movement and the hippie movement. Um, and after it served its perfect purpose, laid the groundwork for illusion, and setting up, the liberal movements and the liberal struggle, and kind of like this liberal Republican enemies kind of narrative. It moved on to other things. And over time since then, we pretty much kind of hid the fascist aspects of the world, and we do that more so in modern day with like the liberal kind of societal rules that are going on. And because a lot of these liberals live in this world, um, they kind of gave up having hope to stop this system and the surveillance and the hive mind stuff and the telepathy and all these torture programs and all the different parts of society involved with it. So they kind of went with the flow, and now, they're kind of behind closed doors doing evil things, to the extent, of, a literal fascist totalitarian state, you know. And since that's how the world is, they say, well, at least we'll get the politics that we want and desire, and hopefully we get something out of it. So, like I said, like the 70s, they had more of the hippies, and they kind of became yuppies. And, you know, this happened with, you know, the punks and the party kids. Kind of happened with all the rockers and metal crowds. It happened with the emo crowd. It happened with the hipster crowd that's happening now. They all grow up and they go down the pipeline, and then once they're in adulthood, they are compliant with the system, or they're brought up with these subliminal messages, and they just kind of cogs in a wheel. So yeah, everyone kind of sells their soul at some point, and they pretend everything's okay. Like I said, kind of we have even more so with like the fascism disguised as political correctness, you know, soft language to do all this kind of stuff. Basically, you know, we call it canceling, and it extends to literally people's life. It's not something in social media or media, you know, this affects people's lives. This is censorship. This is breaching freedom of speech, freedom of expression. And it gets into, you know, stuff that I don't really want to talk about. But basically, you know, all these things use soft or fun language to kind of make it like okay in the society. But this is to pretty much distort what's really being done and what's being said. And like I said, they're always kind of making these good versus evil kind of things. And we do this with USA and Russia, right? We did it with the space race. We did it during the Cold War. And although these things are real, before it was taken off Netflix, even though the Russian, you know, government state-run stuff was kind of like, you know, a staple in the narrative. We don't really know what's going on there. We don't really know the culture there. But a lot of the TV programs that I saw on Netflix had a lot of the same political propaganda and the liberal programming and the radical liberal programming from the political correctness that was kind of going on 2012, 2016 onwards. So it just kind of shows that everyone's kind of in the know. They're just kind of playing their part. As I said, the NASA, the 4D and the space exploration that goes with that. You know, basically, when we took all the Nazi scientists after World War II, they literally helped create and shape the space program and the rockets, and shaped much of how we kind of go about stuff within the United States and the world order. Just some other key points that kind of show, kind of like breaking down the walls a little bit. There was a time, you know, I remember Dave Chappelle pretty much had a conversation saying they were forcing him to do all these different kind of things, and he ended up fleeing to Africa, and, you know, they were trying to get him to do more stuff with his Dave Chappelle show. And he was also bringing up Martin Lawrence, who was and is, you know, a fairly well-known actor, and basically how he was running in the middle of the street saying, hey, somebody is trying to kill me, and all this kind of stuff, which kind of goes along with the programming that the government kind of takes over all aspects of your life and tries to kill you and plays with your mind. So the reality of his situation and Dave Chappelle's, you know, it kind of shapes what was going on. And of course, you know, in modern day, Dave Chappelle is very well known. And, you know, so he ended up playing the game, quote unquote. But, you know, it goes to show what happens to actors and individuals once they get into a little bit of fame. And it kind of shows once you're in the belly of the beast, whether that be government or Hollywood, you kind of have to play by those rules if you want to get somewhere. You know, once again, I'm trying not to hop on politics, but a lot of it is political, and that's done on purpose. It's done by design. So, you know, we have a lot of good stuff where, you know, 50% of a lot of politics and, like I said, corporations now have women in them, or women leading charge, or part of the structure or substructure. And still not much has really changed as far as conduct and all these things. And we have made progress, but like I said, as far as how fast we could evolve versus how fast we are evolving, it remains to be seen, right? And you know, feminine voices, um, that are now being heard. I don't know if they make the connection that how they say about the white supremacy and how white males ruled for so long, and how we have a bunch of old white people kind of running stuff still, or that were a decade ago. They didn't take into consideration, and I don't know if they still do, that these a large part of the white population, or even the white working class from back 100 years ago or whatever, they never got their voices heard. Like, literally no one wrote their stories down. They weren't included in the culture. And if you fast forward to the women getting heard, are they really reflecting the women in culture? And you can go to the LGBT communities, you can go to the black community. You got BET. You have now section for a lot of platforms for black people, and basically, is their voice being heard, or is it based on a culture and manufactured kind of fabrication of what they want that part of society to think, or certain parts of that to think? And obviously in the 80s and 90s, it was to make a lot of these people look like criminals, and on the other half of it with like this kind of cool fresh take, and they had like the gangster attitude, and like you trace that back to the Italians or anything like that in the 50s. And the mafia was cool. They were tough guys, but they were cool, they were good fellas, you know what I mean? And that kind of echoes in the same thing within the black community, kind of not teaching them everything they need to. And that kind of goes into the black family and black culture structure, and how they struggle. And obviously the government is a big part of that. But even now, the government is not doing what they should be. They'll have a segment of the black population that is more aggressive or more violent, and they're just like, hey, just leave them alone and let them kill themselves, or do whatever conduct they will do. And they use them to paint them as a bad guy just for politics. Let alone the fact that you know millions of lives are changed and put through a system that they're gonna be benefiting on. And once again, this isn't black people. This is all types of people, any type of immigrants. They can always use them. And in the modern day, we're using white people. You know what I mean? Which a lot of it is kind of like this revenge kind of thing. Some of it justified, some of it not. And so, it hits every race, it hits every demographic, and everybody does have prejudice against different kinds of people. And once again, this is something that we have cleaned up and hidden, but we should be talking about. If you're white, you can't talk before a black person talks about a black issue, and kind of it goes around in that circle. And everyone has eyes in their heads. Everyone has a perspective. Everyone, isn't synced up to a sound bite. You know what I mean? People can't always perfectly say stuff. But yeah, basically, we're living in a hidden modern day monarch, and that's also hidden, and this totalitarian kind of factor and all that kind of stuff. So, like I said, you can go. Yeah, I don't remember the guy's name, but there was an actor from the Thor movies who ended up jumping off a bridge, and he was talking about a lot of crazy stuff in his posts. Just a couple that I watched, but it was enough to like remember it in my memory. And he was talking about a time of light and purity, kind of like what I'm talking about. But you never know the conspiracy behind his story and the manufactured kind of tale he was spinning. And you get into the conspiratorial side of it, is like, is he dead? Did he fake his death? And you can go into many people like that. You know what I mean? And then, like I mentioned before, like the 27 Club with Kurt Cobain, Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, and how they created that. Is it a coincidence that they were 27? Yeah. But over time, the culture turns it into something else, and then eventually it's not just a coincidence. That's what it is, and a lot of people follow that, and they just, they take that and turn it into what it is. And just to show like the hypocritical kind of backwards, double-sided nature of things. Just to mention a couple names. There's an actress, I guess. I'm not sure. Also an influencer, other stuff like that. Named Sydney Sweeney, and basically, I remember in the news, she had been created controversy for a, blue jeans commercial connected to blue eyes, which kind of connected to, purity of the white race or something like that. And she herself had done a lesbian or female on female kiss, which kind of shows the complete, if she's part of that, is she also that? I'm not saying that someone who's, a lesbian cannot be, into, the purity of the white race or something like that. But to have the same character, if you want to call her that, doing both of those things, and no one really points out that, I would say it shows, how they just kind of use people and recycle them back into the system as something else for a completely different group, a different demographic, or different politics. Excuse me. And there's also another guy named Gavin McInnes, and he basically helped co-found or start Vice and Vice News, which is a media outlet and does some cultural stuff. And basically, that started off kind of like a mainstream thing, which already kind of got a liberal influence, and then got radically more liberal when things changed, 2016 onward, and then he himself, he ended up starting the Proud Boys, which I'm not sure if it's like a white power thing or kind of like this nationalism thing or kind of like a mix of both. I know that the Proud Boys do have like multiple racial kind of people in it, so it's not just white people, but it's kind of with that same arc. So once again, you have a guy, they can just say, oh, they just switch sides, or maybe they're an agent within the culture and they associate with different things at different times, and then they get plugged in wherever they get plugged in. This can, like I said, it's not saying, one thing or another, that everyone's kind of always playing both sides, but in the foundation, that's kind of, what the case is. And some people, are based on their beliefs and leanings, or they change or stuff like that, but they always are waiting to be recycled into the mix in some way. So they're not afraid to, play someone who's going to be making the Proud Boys or a blue jeans commercial with some white power kind of stereotype behind it. Once again, in the public, we're pushing kind of like this white privilege, white supremacy thing. So all these kind of things go into that. So even if you're making something look bad or look good, it's all to do the narrative of that kind of stuff. And once again, I don't remember her name, so unfortunately, if you were interested in this, you just gotta look it up. But there was a Mandalorian show based on Star Wars, and an actress from that had made a social media comment, basically saying we're living in the time of like Nazis, and that is objectively true. But because she was not on the liberal side of the argument, because she was saying that about liberals, she was canceled, aka censored from the platform, and had her life ruined. She was taken off the show, all this kind of stuff. And that is, once again, that's fascism. I hate to say it like that, but and we're going to keep going that direction until people stop stuff. Don't just toe your party line. And this has always been the case for politics, way beyond the start of this country. But we need to have people who aren't going to toe the line with party stuff, and kind of always be, like I said, like that purple, where it's kind of in between, and you have independent thought, you have organic thought, you think of self-evident truths, and you base your opinion on that. And if you're going to just be a character or a role for playing the government, it's something that we can do much better than. And hopefully, regardless, the gatekeepers of this world, or the people in the government who take care of that stuff for the culture, they can move towards the evolution, towards having both opinions and not using this divide and conquer concept. It's very old, it's from ancient times. We can do better, so we should do better. Once again, what comes with that, all that other talk, just to add another thing before I move on a little, They have like the punching up and punching down, where it's basically in comedy or culture, you cannot make a joke about anyone pretty much except a white person or a white male because they're said to be at the high point of the hierarchy or the patriarchy, if you want to call it that. Which once again, the women are now part of the patriarchy and they haven't changed anything. So in a lot of ways, they have smashed the patriarchy, but nothing's really changed, and they took on the roles of those patriarchs. But the fact that you have that going on and it's not being called out, and you also have all these people who whether it's a gay person or a person of color, you can make a joke about them. We can have humor in our differences, and when I was growing up, it was called observational humor, and that should exist. That should always exist because it shows the truth in what's really happening. And because there's so much artificial culture or plastic culture, it's hard to see the truth. And so more and more, it's just going to one narrative, even if there are two parties in the culture. So yeah. And lastly, just kind of going on to just like a little sub point. I know there was, a Republican kind of talking head slash, public figure on the right named Charlie Kirk, and he basically was shot dead by a mass shooter, which once again, one of the main points what I want to be talking about. And right before he got shot, he was talking about mass shooters. And there was kind of a subliminal, just in the footage that I was shown, it might not be right what happened before the shooting, but he kind of did some, I don't remember exactly, but he did some kind of gesture, and it was kind of basically, like this, something along those lines. And what I know from my subliminal messaging, which is this usually, it could be intended like something smells, or it could be like, right on the nose. So he gave that gesture in all the news segments and all that kind of stuff. That's what was shown, and right before any footage that you see of him getting shot, that was basically, the message he was given to the shooter, kind of maybe talking to him in his head, or giving subliminal messages that the shooter wasn't even aware of. And once again, the fact that a Republican is being shot down by someone who kind of encompassed Republican stances and stuff like that. I know there have been other kind of shooters who have gone after people politically, and that kind of thing happened. It should make you scratch your head, and if why not stand up and say something? And once again, we talk about the culture behind stuff. You had a lot of liberals literally laughing at that. Right after it happened, because we live in this, almost 24/7 kind of news cycle life now if you're online. And same thing happened with Hulk Hogan, just to reference another thing. Whether you're the bad person or racist or not, it just kind of speaks of where our culture's at and where the minds of even where the good guys are supposed to be, be at, So I just thought I would mention that and what was going on with that. I believe, you should pay respect to the dead, and it's just kind of as simple as that. And, I know we can do better, so why not do better, right? So moving on to a little bit different, just to bring up as I'm going along. A lot of this subliminal messages in TV and film that's echoed in the culture after, and, in the everyday lives of people. You have kind of like this sex talk or pet talk or this sexualized language that kind of has this dominance and submissive kind of roles associated with it, and this kind of slave language. This is kind of coded with subliminals in our, in our TVs, movies, and music, if you are programmed that way. And that's kind of how a lot of us communicate, whether we know it or not. But it's to control people and control slaves and slave conditioning, or a slave or a toy or a robot. And that's how a lot of these people see innocent people. That's how I've been used, no matter how I try to act accordingly or do whatnot. a lot of these people just come in, they use you like that, and they don't think anything of you being tortured. They come in knowing that you've been tortured for multiple years, or that you're going to die any day or any fucking year. So, a lot of these people, the concept goes to them renting other people or watching people. And, you can go to the cryptic meanings that I've been given in my head, or that they give to these people to say to people, regardless of what's going on. And, you have the term suicide watch. You can see it or hear it in your head as watching someone commit suicide. And, then there's babysitting, literally sitting on a baby. Goes to that joke, how many babies does it take to paint a barn? And it's so much darker than the most darkest humor. So once again, this is what can be done with the language. It can be done with the subliminal messages. I'm not saying that that's what it means, but I'm saying people have definitely 100% used this type of bastardization of the language to create, disorientation in people's brain, or a connection of how they're interpreting messages. Which once again, you can go back to John Lennon, and how he got shot because he was a fake, which is maybe possibly true. And you can go to Charles Manson and how he was kind of connected to the Beatles and Helter Skelter, and all these cryptic messages with the Beatles, which, like I said, I hadn't got quite warmed up in my other video part about the music. But, look at the Beatles lyrics. They're definitely cheeky and cryptic, to say the least. And yeah, so like, as much positivity and 100% love and spirituality, all that kind of stuff that goes with them, they had this darker side to them and this kind of cryptic side to them. And if they know about subliminal messages, then they know how their messages could be interpreted. A lot of these people see it as fun or like a game, and they're just joking around. But if millions of people are dying over how many years, this program, could go back 75 years to, what the government was doing. As soon as TV was put on there were still people doing kind of like these gestures with their eyes or anything like that, So, yeah, just to leave it at that for now. So just to get in a little more to how they really do shape this narrative, and how it's been like this from, the beginning of time, with this order out of chaos and divide and conquer. We all hear that, but we are all participating in a modern day version of that, and we accept our culture and all the war and history that goes on associated with it. And once again, I'm not saying that soldiers didn't give their life for a reason, whether it's World War I or II or any other wars. But at some point, you have to look into why people are going into the service. A lot of people that went into the service, they weren't looking or didn't have any dream jobs lined up. So it's taking people who didn't have any aspirations and then turning them into something that kills. And you see it in so many war movies where they're, in the middle of the war, and they're so like, what are we doing here? How did we get here? Why are we doing this? And, since World War II, we remapped the whole world after World War I and II, just to continue creating conflict. And this is conflict that goes into the modern day with Israel and Palestine. And we gave all the Jewish people over there a new home, and that obviously goes into a lot of religious conflict that I'm not going to speak about. But it just goes to show. And if Jerusalem is this beautiful place and all that, in a perfect world, we're not always going to get what we want, but shouldn't we have all religious paths, all spiritual paths, all coming together? And wouldn't Jerusalem be the best place for that? And you could have a statue or, something to accent that, and just have, a circle of all these statues from every walk of life. And, like, I get emotional because it's so easy to bring all religions together. It's so easy to bring all spiritual paths together. And we want to make this chaos. And we do it even within, so how many sects of Christianity are there? So that's all I'm going to kind of say about that. But it just goes to show how much no one's looking to fight out against this kind of divide and conquer narrative. What comes with this is kind of like the battle in the cosmos. It goes back to ancient times, and that's not something, that's not an aspect that I would want to pay homage to from the ancient times. That or the human sacrifice, going into these guinea pig experiments, and the suicides and homicides of innocent people, and covering up God knows how many people. The 3 million people that die every year, and you get to a decade, that's 30 million people. Take 5%, 10% of that, maybe more, who have been impacted because they're being traumatized and they can't get their lives together, and then they get more traumatized, or they're more jacked into this matrix, or they're taking in subliminal messages, or they have to be subservient to someone in some type of way. And like I said, we don't have privacy of thought, we don't have privacy of information, we don't have privacy of any of our digital devices, any of the information on it. Like I said, we may not get the world that we want, but we can try for it, you know what I mean? So I can just try and reflect the world that I want to see, and play within the game, if you want to call it that. I know it's kind of a darker way to look at things, but when you know how stuff is run behind closed doors, and that it is a game to these people, and it is kind of a script or a narrative that is impacted and embedded in all of us, you know so anyway, it's basically done to create an endless story of good versus evil. So whatever good things that the society is pushing on people, they can think is good and think is progress, and all the evil is to once again make them feel better. Go back to in the 90s or whatever, where people would watch Jerry Springer, and they would watch people who weren't good people or whatnot, and it would make you feel better. You'd be like, oh, at least I'm not them, or whatever. It's the same type of dynamic. But this is, you know, um, generally made up with symbology and themes. And generally, the colors, it can be the blue versus red, black versus white, light in the darkness, white being purity, and, excuse me, black being in the darkness, which that can also take different things. Um, Gold versus silver, that's more of an alchemy thing. And when combined, they, make something beautiful for the alchemical wedding. But anyway, um, so you have blue and gold with liberals, perhaps Masons, Guardians. A lot of the right can be red or green. It just goes into that kind of stuff. Um, but yeah, a lot of the good side, or liberals in this case, have to be the victors by default, because otherwise, you know, um, psychologically, you can say that nothing will help ground the society. But we do, we're talking about the black and white, and how the LGBT, and how this kind of rainbow kind of thing goes on. This is symbol kind of for like putting more color into the world, kind of when TV went black and white to color. Don't you think that the people deserve a society that is reflected by more color, like I said, with this observational humor, where everyone can be talked about, everyone can be criticized, everyone can have jokes about them, and everyone can be seen as a victor? I know, I'm not going to say, I know that we can be like that, and that we can bolster up good Republicans, we can put down bad liberals, we can not follow party lines. And same goes with the good versus evil kind of thing, as a whole. Just because you're from a demographic that might be seen as a negative, doesn't mean there's not going to be a voice or two out of them where you can be like, oh, um, there are things that are more important than the narrative. And I know a lot of people don't care, and they just want to get through their lives. But just speaking to how I think we could impact and influence our culture better, especially in a culture where on social media in society we have actual influencers, or that's what their titles are, and what are they influencing them to do, and how that works, right? But these gatekeepers, sadly, not only do this with TVs and movies and music, but they do this technique within culture and politics, as I said. Um, so once again, the blue versus red, with liberals winning and playing the good guy, and Republicans losing and playing the heel, or the bad guy. The only time in politics or culture when Republicans win is usually an arc which they are looking to add more negative aspects to the society or culture, And once again, this is done through the politics, um, to make, you know, whatever narrative they want. But at the end of the day, the government is trying to get something that overall no one is in favor of. So they use the heel of the situation to do that. So that way they can, oh, that's just them. And we can go modern day with immigration. But every president, to before Reagan has done something with immigration. Every liberal president, Democratic president, has done something. So that should wake you up and kind of make you think, like, oh, maybe this isn't politics at all. It's just business as usual. So everyone, is in on this show or game, and generally everyone on both sides, all sides, stand to make money and add to their status and acclaim and a place in the hierarchy. Obviously, there are insiders and outsiders on both sides, politically and in the culture. And there are good people and bad people on both sides of the political spectrum and within the culture. But people on both sides or wherever in culture wear disguises or different hats that are decided generally on politics and or their opinion of the world. And most are trained in every scenario, every part of the spectrum. Thus, they all must learn to wear any costume or play any role for any plot or plot line or real life events. And obviously, this includes politics. But so it's like you don't know to what extent someone is going to carry out their role. For all we know, people could be getting tattoos, wearing clothes that is to make them appear one way when on the inside, or who they are or who they hang out with is completely the opposite or different or a mix. And basically, like I said, money, status, claim, all this kind of stuff. And that's really unfortunate, but it is a way of the world that most people go with. Once again, I'm just saying, can't we do a little better, right? So, just to say a little fun fact, this good versus evil and these two sides, it can even be seen in tic-tac-toe, a game, right? It was originally called Knots versus Crosses, which would generally be pagans versus saints or pagans versus Christians or whatever it was at the time. And it evolved into tic-tac-toe. But, so this goes back, hundreds of years, thousands of years. And back then, the ruling class was hand in hand with the Christianity or the religious circles. And the pagans obviously were not. So like I said, like this divide and conquer, it goes back as far as the written word, So anyway, at the same time, they can create an illusion of progress that is a manufactured story by design and push prosperity and humane decisions to appease the people, appeasing the people being the main factor of that. These are positive and objectively good things and are real, but at the same time, they are part of an agenda that is rolled out in 1 to 5 to 10 to 25 year increments, maybe even longer. You talk about some of this secret society stuff or the governmental stuff. The Masonic arc, goes back 600 years, goes back 300 years. In the 1700s, they had lodges all over the world. And a lot of people say that's part of the conspiracy, but no. I mean, they were bringing enlightenment. And as I say, enlightenment, they had the period of enlightenment and all these different things where, in the modern day, we'll call it like the all-seeing eye. It's the same thing. So, to gaslight anyone or to say they're conspiracy theorists or any of that kind of stuff, it's like, no, all these things are connected to royalty, to government, to the elite, to the ruling class, to public figures, to Hollywood. And it needs to be said, and how many Hollywood movies have themes that have Masonic outlinings or secret society outlinings or alchemy or hermetics. The list goes on, Like I said, there's a duality to it, but it's been out of balance forever, and it's been worse. It's worse now than it ever has been. Um, so with this agenda, once again, that is planned, negative parts of the agenda in society's case being an ever tightening noose on our security, our surveillance, our privacy, our technology, invasive technology, harmful science, harmful medical practices, a corrupt economy and government, freedom, and lastly, our very own thoughts and perspectives. This forced arrangement and narrative over time leaves less and less organic conversation and human participation, and even less room for self evident truths, organic conversation in exchange for a cleaner and neater and more pleasant society and a culture for people to hold on to, even if most feel inside like their true voice is not being heard and that the world is still a cold and volatile place, which is once again the point of everything I'm saying. In this agreement that we all take and participate in, we also are told we are given protection and safety, but this is only if we obey the rules, submit completely, and question nothing. Even on the topic of civil rights or freedom of any kind, mainly being speech and expression, we stand to lose favor or even credibility or presence in society. If we do not stick to the script, which solely or figuratively or quite literally in many aspects. I don't know, I think I messed up something with my reading. My apologies. But we stand to lose favor or even credibility or presence in the society if we do not stick to the script, which solely or figuratively or quite literally. Yeah, I don't know how that worked. Oh, excuse me. I guess I wrote that wrong, like I said. Can only give a presentation as best I can. So we notice that we only see certain types of voices heard within the Black community or LGBTQ plus community. Why do we mainly only see tropes of gay men that are flamboyant with a feminized voice? Excuse me. Why do we only see Black characters that have a swag or coolness factor or a stereotypical gangster type persona? And even with white characters, we only see certain stereotypes. In modern day, we will see the cool or radical character or hipster as a hipster or a progressive. And when you see a negative or bad white character, you will generally see a racist, a heartless corporate figure, or an asshole. Also could go to redneck or hick or hillbilly. A lot of those people would generally be identified as a Republican or, kind of a person who's with the country. And a lot of these corporate cutthroat people are never seen as liberal, even though in the real world, most like I said, with mostly the social media and tech companies, even on top of that, half of all these corporations are owned by liberals. This is done to embellish this manufactured and unrealistic narrative for the world, so that everything fits in its place and fits together in a way so that no one questions anything, and trying to give like the cleanest version that they can. If one does ask questions about the world will eventually, truthfully, sorry, once again how I wrote this, I didn't proofread it good enough, I guess. If one does ask questions about the world will eventually look offensive and condescending to the individual and not accepting or grateful to anyone who thinks outside the box in our society, though it is promoted and advertised as such. that everyone has their own unique voice, that anyone can be anything that they want. And anyone who gets old enough knows this is not true. So, minorities, or even the majority of any kind, will see representation of them shown in our culture or mainly on a screen or somewhere in our culture, but it will not truly reflect who they are, what they think, in the broad spectrum of colors that are present in their emotions and thought process. In our modern day, we are only allowed to discuss or talk about politics, issues, or culture in a certain way, or else we face ostracization or other consequences. And in addition to that, programming for the mainstream in respect to political correctness or politics has left half being censored and targeted, and the other half has been triggered or easily angered or offended and unheard. These social norms and new rules for society at large are, in fact, fascist and debilitating to our sensibility and to the individuals who are most compassionate for honesty and true change. And once again, this is by design, and to force only the agreed upon narrative by insiders and government, and done so that their agenda can just be dwindled out over years with little feedback or change, and no room for organic or, more importantly, human responses and conversation. Sorry, I'm taking along a little bit of torture right now. Kind of been hit in the head for this entire video. Just got hit with some pretty bad chemicals in the air. Excuse me. Oh man. So just kind of highlight an important factor with how we got to our modern culture and kind of perfecting the awful system that we have right now. A lot of it that is hidden in plain sight, or most of it rather. In 1971, there was this Stanford prison experiment, and basically this study was on authority, antisocial and social norms, breaking down of the individual, how to implement a police state of citizens, and psychological and conditioning effects on power roles, and how behavior can be influenced by these power roles. And now this is once again something that's programmed into us digitally, whether that be with subliminal messages or the AI or the social media or any of that kind of stuff. But basically, this was a experiment where basically they took random people off the street and they gave them the role of prisoner and guard, and basically it just showed in very little time, I would say, how the guards became very aggressive, really corruptible, and showing that power always corrupts, and it gives you a sense of entitlement and embellishes on that. And then the prisoners would have this this misery attached to them, or they would be basically reflect all the negative aspects, and then give them depression or anxiety or make them feel less than. And once again, this is obviously experienced by actual prisoners and prison guards in the real world. But when this kind of dynamic has taken shape in our culture, taken shape in real life interactions, based on the status of people, or who has money or who doesn't, who has their voice heard, all that kind of stuff. And like I said, you go into, like I said, with these people who treat human beings like myself kind of like toys or robots or pets, and a lot of the subliminal language kind of goes into that, like I said. And there's kind of like this known thing that no one really says, that there's kind of like this sexual element to the language in our interactions. But these torture victims, test subjects, you know, basically were used, with no respect, no humanity at all. And whether it's like this harvesting of the souls of everybody or these types of individuals, were all kind of used as livestock, figuratively and sadly, literally, and now more so than ever. Um, Chosen people for subjects, and victims for observation. It can also be used for good things like muses and inspiration to people. But once again, this is never told in the light of day because we're told to stay to a script. But these people are used for ritual, for sport, for torture, for fun, for amusement, and we've become pretty much a sadist nature because of that. Um, so just getting into before I get into it, like I have mentioned before, the modern world has made us believe that this barbaric kind of ritualistic bloodline world has been dead, has is dead and gone. But it's just been modified. It's been made more hidden and reimagined beyond recognition, so that no one can say it exists anymore, except through the points and details and factors that I'm kind of outlining it. And you'll rarely see any of these really mentioned, right? Definitely not in the mainstream. Um, and they definitely have more criticism if they're mentioned pretty much anywhere in the world, you know. So going with the prisoner dynamic, I just want to state once again, I can only speculate, um, from my perspective and seeing the perspective of others and seeing how the world works, which once again, anyone who finds out this kind of stuff or learns over the time of their life, or if they're born into it, or if they are coming to be a public figure or musician, actor, that kind of thing, or anybody in any part of the government or in corporations, you know, um, just just viewing and observing that, and kind of giving an outlay of what I see. It may not be 100%, but once again, fairly accurate. And I'm someone who, will stand up to say it rather than people who will continue to let it happen or even, deny or gaslight, even gaslight the words that I'm saying, even knowing that they're true, in favor of trying to keep this fake protection and honor going. So they don't want it to affect their life. A lot of the subliminal stuff, they literally, you know, um, a lot of the in the music, but if you go into horror movies or any of that kind of stuff, it really leans on like this evil stuff and makes it real and like the devil and this kind of satanic stuff. I mean, in the 80s, they had the satanic panic, and that's also when horror movies came out. So the subliminal messages that go along with that and how it's kind of embedded into our culture, it really shows, you know, what's being done. And like a lot of this kind of stuff, a lot of people will be accepting. You can look at it more in music. Like I said, I listen to metal and hardcore, but you see it in hip hop, see it in other music, where it's really kind of welcoming this kind of satanic attitude, to call it, without being able to call it anything else in simple terms. So anyway, prisoners and those facing punishment via mind control and psychological warfare, and even direct energy weapons and microwaves through digital devices, um, by the government, military, private sector, tech, ruling class, and oppressors, and certain gatekeepers, guardians with more power and say so over the narrative and the unwritten law, that sets conduct for the insiders and society at large, as well as the hidden hierarchy that hides in plain sight, are generally outsiders, those in perceived state of limbo or purgatory, both in their lives and in their minds psychologically. Those in the know or insiders lower in status or good standing are in the hidden hierarchy, who are trying to um, get a better status, or those in the hidden hierarchy that disobey. Those who do not work, those into conspiracy or conspiracy theories, those who are spying on insiders or trying to get information, and are privy to the subliminal programming, so they can read between the lines and see the intended language of certain messages. Republicans, um, people on the right, who will do domestic terrorism, though government's clearly an illegal version of domestic terrorism. But yeah, so this doesn't exclude that this same type of stuff can happen to liberals, and that's if they're going against the status quo or the narrative. And yeah, sorry, I can't make out what that says. But or they break rules or orders of any sort. People who are trying to earn their place, like I said, those who try to change, disrupt, or alter the narrative or agenda, those who do not kneel face the worst punishment and torture, and often become torture victims, test subjects themselves, who have their complete life scripted, designed, and tested on a daily basis, most of whom commit suicide and or homicide, and mostly likely a large part, if not all of our mass shooters, which depending on how stats are compromised or analyzed, are 100 to 500 per year in the US. All insiders must self-police and participate in the torture hazing rituals, even if the torture test subjects and even the torture tests and test subjects. Yeah, sorry, I'm gonna reread that. Sorry, like I said, I'm taking on a lot of different stuff right now. All insiders must self-police and participate in the torture hazing rituals, and even the torture and testing of subjects, and goes even to the extent of placing them in mental hospitals, as staff, or even patients who are forced to do so for various reasons or simply for money. In general, a large influence on these individuals is money or even regular income, which gives a completely new and inhumane dynamic to the term blood money. These practices have been progressively getting worse since the 80s, and since 2012 and 16 have gone to even sicker extremes. I will also comment that since the pandemic in 2020, a good portion of hospital staff have quit their occupation, which I will not go further into, but I hope, think, and know you understand what I am implying, and I have seen it with my own eyes. This also gives another new horrifying meaning to only the strong survive. Prisoners, victims, and torture subjects are all trained to notice all subtleties to a painful degree, which predominantly are done with signals and psychic driving via TVs, movies, and music, and then by people in the real world. Once again, I can't really describe what it feels like to really be commanded by thoughts or other people with gestures or whatnot. But like I said, being painfully aware of subtleties, like even if someone goes like that, you'll have some intended embedded programming, it could be, an elbow like I just did, being rough with someone or indicating left or right, any kind of thing, and any connotations with those meanings, Sorry, I got tripped up. I'm sorry if I didn't read that too well, but hopefully you get it. So just to give like a basic timeline, once again, 1800s, the invention of Pavlovian and classical conditioning was coming into style. A lot of that with the dog and ringing a bell and associating using different reward systems or behavior associated before ringing a bell, and kind of going off of that. And that's gone into what we have today very slowly over time. Went to psychology and sociology, all these different fields all stemming from this. In the 1900s, eugenics came into play in the world. Obviously, many people were trying to do that in some type of way, working up to the creation of eugenics, which the U.S. was sadly a part of since its origin, and most of that's hidden. Harry Laughlin is a name to recognize in that community, among others, if you want to go down that trail. In 1873, the theorized existence of electromagnetic waves in the grid of energy, powers, and signals and vibration for the Earth and globe, also known as ley lines within spiritual realms in conversation. This was kind of came into being, and so, like I said, the energy, power, signals, and vibrations of the world could kind of be tracked, recognized, and the study of each of those things, obviously down the line, and science became a thing. 1887, Hertz created radio waves. 1920s, we got the first radio stations, which was the first time many millions could tune in and be programmed together in real time. Once again, I say tune in. This could be into the signal, the sound wave, vibration, or frequency, and this would be shot right into your head, communicate with your brain, go through your ear canals, and it can interact in many different ways on how you perceive it. And once again, like the people who were putting in these programs, they were definitely they had an intended meaning, and if there were subliminal messages or sub-communication going on at that time, like I said, by TV, they were already doing all these hand gestures. So I don't, we can only see, we can't see what was going on when they had pictures, right? So you can't tell what kind of life they were living, but at least when we had film and the silent films and all that started to come in, we could see how people were living and acting. So it's hard to tell, when these body gestures came, into being. Obviously, actors learn them. Theater actors learn them. Motivational speakers, certain public figures, they have classes for this. So, that's where we see it in our modern day. Anyone going through that kind of training gets this. But like I said, anyone in my situation or someone who's being, given this sub-communication, this different way of learning through language or anything like that, definitely plays a role. But anyway, 1940s, we had the first computers, data collection, transmissions and communications, and nuclear research. At this time, 1988 was the first fiber optic cable that pretty much covers 95% of all international communication through underwater cables, being fiber optic, pretty much near 1 million miles, over 1 million kilometers. And in 1866, the first transatlantic cable came into being, pretty much doing a lot of the same stuff. I'm not sure about the percentage of communication, but just showing that, Britain to United States, and onward, the influence that Britain had to India, all those other places. Yeah. So, 1980s, and obviously very even earlier, the digital and wired systems came into being, turning into wireless and Wi-Fi, and pretty much the growth and evolution of servers and connections, and servers, how we watch TV now, but obviously all that stuff was used in the military and all that kind of stuff. In the 50s, like I said, we remapped the whole world. This also gave birth with the UN and NATO, which is obviously a commanding force in our world now. A lot of who we can blame for a lot of this stuff going on, as far as like the world order and how things are trickled down into a narrative, and how everyone kind of has to play a role and almost following marching orders in every single factor of their life. And as far as like impacting the world and all of that. So, What comes with this, like I said, is you have acoustics, physics, quantum physics, electromagnetic, electromagnetism, telecommunications, quantum computing, nuclear power, atomic power, molecular physics, particles, chemistry, pharmaceuticals, and going into more of, without getting too much into it, we are said to have five senses, but obviously with what's going on with the time and space manipulation, the 3D and 4D experience, and how your consciousness perceives it, and that some people say that there are 12 dimensions of consciousness. We can get into telepathy, teleportation, telekinesis. A lot of the modern versions are done with electrical, digital means, by signals, by sounds, and once again, vibration and frequency. And once again, CGI, AI, computer generated or AI generated, green screen effects, Foley effects, and special effects going into the audio tracks of, both audio and for video, doing the audio side of the audio and video signal. All these things play a role. Just kind of going to the underwater cables, but also going to the pipelines, which I'm about to talk about. Basically, they had natural gas pipelines made out of bamboo, dating back to 500 BC in China. So that shows that, this did exist, since ancient times, and so when we're seeing all this stuff, they had variations of it that came before it, and then the predecessors that are associated with that. But in the 1860s to now, there are now pipes and pipelines all over the earth. And between the 1860s to the 1930s to modern day, 70% of all countries have some sort of pipeline going on. Even in state forests, parks, benches, and other nature areas. This is, all, this has all been kind of infected. And so, there's nowhere where you can go where a man-made structure will not be seen, or a man-made thing that was once in use that's not in use, and how this kind of goes to connect to torture victims, or giving punishment to people so that they behave or do whatever. As I said, my home has basically been turned into a concentration camp, which kind of spits in the face of everything we were supposed to believe in and feel. And World War II, we had the Nazis. Like I said, we got all the Nazi scientists, and we basically became the Nazis. And a lot of it was done with this sub-communication and this hive mind technology and the subliminal messages. And like I said, it was the ruling classes and the people that worked along their side that got us to this point where now we're, basically the same thing. But yeah, so connecting further to that, however they do it, now anywhere I can go in this whole country, in this whole world, is somewhere that I may be exposed to gas coming above the ground, coming from underground, and giving me exposure to whatever chemical agents and gases that they want. And there's also, just part I'm going to mention really quickly, and I'll say it in another part of the video series, dealing with kind of like teletransference, which is kind of like a term I'm kind of coining, but teletransfers and teledeliveries and digital deliveries of chemicals in your body and in your atmosphere, once again going to 4D space and time manipulation. So there's been times, just for an example, where I'll have like a burst of bleach like right in front of my face, you know what I mean? and then it'll be gone. 5 seconds, it's gone. You know, and then there's other times where I've had literally like telesurgery, and this is something you can go look up in Google. It does exist, and they will actually admit it now. But to the extent of which it exists, where you can have chemicals kind of delivered to you remotely, um, that can be in your body, that can be in your head, and that can be in your environment. So some of that's what I've experienced, but like I said, a lot of it, I think, for happening in my environment. I can go in my driveway. I went into my woods. I went camping in my woods and in my backyard, and I was still hit with poison. I was still hit with chemical agents. You know, God knows what else. Um, all just for these sick experiments, all for torture, all to, you know, offer as some type of punishment, or at least in my head to be a punishment. These things are real. And the fact that a human being cannot go anywhere in this entire world without being poisoned, that's a scary thing. And that is way too much power for a government or any person or any society to have. And the fact that we are using brute force in this type of fashion, it's disgusting behavior. And somebody has to say something about it. And I really wish it wasn't someone who was experiencing it, but I guess that's how it has to be. And I can only hope that an insider from these companies that do this awful stuff, or who, the people that give your water in your town. I haven't had clean water in over 6 months. I haven't had service or accessibility to water that was clean. Literally, these psychops have controlled my whole town. It has burned the town to the ground. It has burned everyone in my town to the ground. And this goes to the distribution networks and the serialization of food, medicine, and anything you will touch. And right now, there's literally nothing I can fucking touch that hasn't been altered, and that doesn't go into, like I said, people altering what I have once I buy it, and coming into my house and stealing it. And once again, this teletransference, this teleportation, that is real. It does exist. I'm telling you, it does. Literally, things in my backpack that I would carry with me all day long, it changes. And I've opened up my backpack, having my backpack with me all day long. And I unzip it, and poison. It smells of poison and smells of chemicals that react with my signature, my DNA, and my signature to give me a response. And you know what I mean? That's truly evil stuff, to not know what's going on and to have to experience that kind of stuff that, they'll tell you, like I said, futuristic sci-fi kind of stuff. And like I said, they outline this stuff in the films years before it happens. I'm not sure about that stuff. I know there is a show called Biohackers that I just saw like a little while ago. That stuff's real. It's been real for decades, 1880s. First bacteriological agricultural labs, 1940s. First biowarfare labs, obviously within the Army, U.S. Army. 1970s with the first biolabs and bioengineering. 1910s to 1957 with the first genetics labs. 1883, the first eugenics lab in the UK. 1904, U.S. Station for Experimental Revolution. 1910, Eugenics Record Office. Germany in 1905, Society for Racial Hygiene. In modern day, all the universities, Harvard, Yale, Stanford, renamed buildings and institutions, but still have the same research. You can go with, brain computing labs, and giving messages between animal brains at Duke, Gallant Labs, and UC Berkeley. I forgot the other stuff from that, but I did say it in another video, and I will probably mention it in another one. But basically, every college is involved with these sick stuff, sick experiments. And whenever they say they're doing stuff with animals, you can bet your ass that they're doing it on human beings. And so I'm part of whatever aspect of this, whether it's, it can go as specific as exposure to radiation for astronauts who will go into space, and when we have a base on the moon, and later on to Mars, and seeing how the human body takes that kind of stuff. in addition to all these different chemicals and the endurance just of the human body, which, you think, we would have a little more respect for human beings. The fact that I'm going through psychological stuff, physical stuff, mental stuff, um, and all these other different kinds of experimentals. There's literally like 10 different types of horrifying, inhumane crimes against humanity done to me in so many different aspects. Um, so yeah, I guess it does it for that. I just want to go on that too a little bit, just to give a timeline to basically the conditioning to the digital signals made by electromagnetic waves, which are both for the weapons and to put out transmission and communications and subcommunications for subliminal messages, and to the radio, to the TV, to the movies, to the music, on all your digital devices. You have the satellites, basically bouncing off of everything, and NASA doing the 4D space-time manipulation in the military and government part of every aspect of that, not to mention private sector. So just kind of making a connection for anybody on that kind of stuff. So now to get into the specifics of subliminal messages. Sorry, I gotta take a drink. So I will get into some other tropes, but this goes to the same kind of concept of like a master key, or something similar to that. Kind of different tropes, and I will say some other ones later. But so basically, cars are a big part of it. So associated with that could be, or you're driving rather, so associated with that would be cars, keys, driving itself, a bus, a taxi, and the term associated with this would be the psychic driving, like I said, which I'll go into more detail in the other videos. But basically, I can have someone psychic drive in my brain, from their brain. I can have someone be attached to a hive mind with, what you could say equivalent of like a watch party on a streaming platform. Multiple people in my head connected to my brain signal. You could have someone psychic driving my brain while I'm watching TV, and they will interact as the characters on top of the subliminal messages in the AI programming and the script that is set to a track. Basically going with that, excuse me. And there are experiments, like I said, from colleges that you can look up, from the ones that I mentioned. But basically syncing script and words in real time. And what they did to pretty much make me know that this was something that was real is they would say the same word in my head at the exact same time as a TV show, a movie, or music would say it, out loud. So basically, it would say the same exact word as I'm hearing it out loud. And this would happen, 5 times during the show, 10 times during the show. So it would let me know psychologically that I was in sync in real time with the TV show I was watching. And like I said, this was on TV, on cable. This has been on digital devices. This has been on different websites, or it could be on YouTube. And I'll get a little more into the YouTube aspect, some of the other things going on with that. But this basically lets you know there's a program in your head, and that your thoughts are literally being automated and are in sync with the program or script. So like I said, you have, just for another example, you have MIDI in music programming, and that's something I used. So basically, you can program drums, and so it has kick, snare, hi-hat, different cymbals, the toms, all that kind of stuff going on, and you can program it so it will be kind of like a map, and so that map will then translate into audio. And now we have programs where we can translate MIDI into audio and audio into MIDI, so it gets even crazier. But mapping and automation, that's basically the best way I can put it. So you have a template for something, and then you can adjust periodically. It can be privy to improvisation, and of course, in this component, you, the human being, the innocent victim or subject, you're the one adding in the improvisation. And over time, whether it's people taking down notes who are spying on you, knowing your personality traits, what you're thinking, how you react to certain situations, how you react to certain tropes or themes, that then is all written down or then programmed or both. And then over time, AI automates what your reaction will be to stuff, and then it can better suit how to torture you and better suit to know your personality or customize even to a deeper level than it already is. Which Invasion of the Mind, I would say, already scary and specific enough, right? So once going onto those tropes again, they have babies, which once again, I'll go into a little more. But babies, they have screaming and crying because they won't accept the world for how they are, and then they got family as a theme, as I said before, about like welcome to the family kind of thing. They have rats, they have pigs / cops, goes interchangeable. They have gas, electricity, dew, planters, flowers, which could be in the sub-language as flowers, go with the flow. Roses, fire, getting fired, firing people. That's a big one. It could be an indication that you're going to get tortured or get a warning or punishment. There's marriage or wedding, which once again, that can be getting married or bloody married, which goes into the Virgin Mary archetype and Virgin kind of ritual, and the Mary ritual and the Jesus Christ ritual, and also wedding. They have wetting in the Assassin's world or the Mafia world. You got wet work, which is basically blood work and stuff like that. So people doing killing or whatever. Once again, that association with torture and killing with marriage and weddings. And once again, the ring, you get ringing in your ears. You wear a ring when you get married. You got the telepathy in your ears, and that would be the ring from the telephone. Like I said, it may seem kind of detached and all that kind of stuff, but the way that the programs work, if you look into the culture enough, or you see in different TV shows, a lot of people, when they're on the phone, a lot of that dialogue can be kind of moved around or scripted in a certain way. So yeah. So once again, like I said, telephone, connecting to the hive mind. You have business, show business, the business, the family business. If you read between the lines, the family being the one who runs society, the business is what they do, which is, keeping people in line, torturing people, various different things, and so different things for that. You can go the company or a company man, someone who's part of this inside kind of guy. Once again, military, they were broken down into companies. So it goes to show, like, the marching orders. There are so many things, like you have surgical operations, and then you have military operations, and then psychological operations and covert operations. So if you're watching something on TV talking about a surgery or an operation or a surgical operation, they can make the connection in your head, and if your brain picks it up, like I said, the AI will learn your behavior and how you know stuff and what you pick up. And like I said, some people write this stuff so it can occur that way, and other times it happens organically with your connection in your own mind, and creates your own lexicon of understanding, and that's how they can customize people's stuff. So once again, going on, the company, the business, they have the office, the band, once again, a marching band, a military band, drills, emergency protocols. Once again, going to pets with the whole pet talk, sex talk. Has cats, dogs. Once again, the dogs go into Pavlovian conditioning. They do a lot of stuff where they say you get arrested or you're a prisoner of war, you're in jail, and that's one of like these subliminal themes that kind of keeps you guessing and thinking like, did I do something worse? Or, it lets you know subliminally or with sub communications that something is happening. And what comes with that is, court and lawyers and legal stuff. So any type of wording like that in shows can also get you. And just to put a reference on it, it's like you have court, you have judicial court, you have royal court, you have a tennis court. These are games that they play with language and stuff like that. Like I said, you can interpret it away, and then there's sometimes they want you to have that intended interpretation. Doctors, to go Doctor Who, riffing off that concept. I don't know if it is, but I would say I think it is. Then again, they have robberies, heists, thieves, crooks, and this can be, in the real world. This can be robbing people's thoughts and memories, or intel, or different information to give to someone else. So you can get tortured in the real world. And like I said, people play these games, and they like to go hunting for torture subjects and killing people in the real world on top of the subliminal and the physical torture. Truly disgusting behavior, but they have that term cheap thrills. That's clearly what these people are all about, and it's sad to say that many of these people, that's what keeps them going is this hunt and pursuit for innocent people, and they think it's out of patriotic patriotism or keeping people safe, and it's not. You know what I mean? Telling the truth to people, like I'm doing. That's what will keep people safe. So those just kind of a few tropes before I get into the other ones. So just to kind of go over, like I mentioned, Doctor Who. I'm just going to mention, a couple TV shows. It's important to note, different TV shows and movies will use body language more or less. They'll use visual cues like in the background more or less. They'll use the dialogue more or less. They'll make the dialogue more cryptic more or less. They'll have more of these kind of like schizophrenic or psychotic kind of meanings to them, or these kind of like multi-layered meanings of the language, which goes interchangeable with like the schizophrenic stuff. Like a side note to add, if you're on like acid or mushrooms, or you get microdosage of this, like which in the past I've been microdosed for like a month, 2 months against my will. I'm pretty fucked up right now, so it's like you can't even tell the difference, or right now I can't, between the programming, the AI, and like if they actually put me on mind altering drugs or designer drugs, I can't tell the difference right now. So but in the beginning of this, like you could definitely they'll tell you in certain ways, and there are so many shows that can say it in a subliminal way without you knowing, or just put thoughts in your head and kind of have like it indition, kind of like the dialogue will be helping that. But just like I said, I'm gonna say different things based on the tropes of the actual show's themes, rather than like, do they actually have some subliminal stuff in the background or in the dialogue or the language or the body language, or the gestures. So I'm just going strictly by themes or stuff from sci-fi stuff. So I'm just going to name off a few for the tropes. So you have, obviously, like with espionage, you have all the different spy movies, all the government stuff like CSI, NCIS, like all that stuff. There's stuff in that. There's all the 007 movies, and everything that comes within that world. They definitely have multi-layered stuff, so you can learn how to subconsciously interrogate someone, different techniques for how to influence people's behavior, all that kind of stuff. Um, so um, basically, you have a lot of these newer shows where it's basically like it's like an academy trope, and it's basically like schooling, and they'll use like stuff like ghosts, vampires, zombies, like the dead, stuff like that. A lot of cryptic kind of stuff, whether it's demons or monsters or dark magic. Then they have like a hero academy kind of thing where doing superpowers or stuff like that. Then you have all those shows where they're doing experiments on people, and so like you have like mutants from like X-Men, so that's one to note, where people are test subjects, and there's lots of shows with test subjects. Firefly is another one where they had one of the characters, um, basically having different parts of their brain cut and rewired, and that's literally happened to me dozens of times. um, so all those kind of shows where they're putting different chemicals in their body, all this different kind of stuff. It's different tropes for the same kind of thing a little bit. It's kind of teaching you, how they do these experiments. It's teaching you how to act with the subcommunication. And I think a lot of it definitely ends on either you're not allowed to think, or you make space, in four-dimensional space, for thoughts, or you can see how the thinking process is going on in people's heads around you, all any of that kind of stuff. um, just a couple of shows that I saw that I wrote down. All of Us Are Dead, the the Dead Don't Die, What We Do in the Shadows, Elite, I Woke Up as a Vampire, Greenhouse Academy, once again another Elite theme, F1 the Academy, Legacies, The Order. I've never seen any of these shows, but just looking with that same similar trope, there's a bunch of other ones. Like I said, like you have like V Wars, that goes into the old show V, which had alien invasion, and then you have V for Vendetta. Um, v is one of those. V could also be five for the Romans. There's so many different connotations that can be implanted in your head. But that's definitely one. Like I said, they want you to have an intended meaning for it so you can understand stuff, and then just turns into mush after a while, and then it's like a joke that can ping pong your mind back and forth, or if you know what it means, you know how to use it, or you know what that actually means. Um, you had Fahrenheit 451, where people are literally burning books. You have Rosemary's Baby, which can go, into, like I said, the Mary, Virgin Mary, Virgin or Rose ritual kind of thing, where rose is a symbol of what's supposed to be pure, and so that's an example of the horror movie turning that on its head. Rosemary's Baby. You have like I said, going back to that baby concept. So like I said, when people learn this, I'm not saying I know 100% of what musicians say or what directors say, but I'm just trying to get you to connect it with your subconscious and kind of figure that kind of stuff out. Like I said, obviously I'm not infallible. I'm not, all knowing in every sort of way. I've just been kind of made a source code for this type of information, and so many people are. So then there's like that trope, cult shows, cult following. Once again, this goes back to cult culture, harvesting. So just that theme alone, it does show a little bit of that duality. And obviously in cult reality, cults are not a good thing. So it's just kind of playing around with duality in a way I think is a misuse and abuse of that. And if you're supposed to be upholding the light while you're doing that kind of stuff and just want to say it's fun and games, knowing that people are being subliminally influenced and makes people torture and kill people, thus they can bring up John Lennon or any of the other people who have killed people for any various reasons. Um, um, right now, I'll say, on top of like all the other tropes for the other shows, um, going back to the thieves and stuff, there's heist movies and con movies and drug dealers and drug dealing movies. You know, and then, like I said, to extend a little more onto that, they'll have the gothic themes, the cult, magic stuff, vampires, ghosts, zombies, witches, cults, all going on to those themes. They can all go in and out of playing with the actual duality that has, been going on for hundreds of years behind closed doors, and how people, goes back to that aristocrats joke where people are doing disgusting things. And then at the end, they say, "Oh, we're the aristocrats," and it's like, this is what your leaders do. These are the jokes they make. Um, goes back to seeing Maury and thinking you're better than the people than on that TV show because their life's a mess. And it's like the rich look at the poor that way, but there's also so many other versions of that and dynamics to that. The show is called Space Force. Um, and that's, like I said, go into the 3D and 4D space and space exploration that connects to NASA and all this other stuff. And like I said, a lot of these shows want to impact people in a way where it feels like they're part of something and they're part of something bigger. Um, but the evil that they are hiding, it can't make up for all this good stuff. And when people are boasting it, when they're not putting any of the negative stuff, like, yes, Space Force, we're part of the people that hide mass shooters and create them. So as much as all these shows might be good shows or putting a positive spin to what is a bad situation, I wish more directors would, disobey or whatever, to put it lightly, and put a little more truth in it and be like showing the negative aspects of this. And that's, once again, something that I want in a better or perfect world. You got Superman, um, just, going on the superhero kind of trope. He was allergic to or had some type of reaction to kryptonite. And how can we perceive that? Cryptic language, cryptic kind of stuff. Obviously, in the show, it was something else. Is this material or whatever? But being cryptic, whether it's the Beatles lyrics being cryptic or language being cryptic because you've been made deaf, quote unquote. You go to Def Comedy Jams, Def Jam. So that's what happened. That's how those got those names, I think. And they were basically like, given so many subliminal messages over time, that they go deaf and then they can't hear stuff correctly. Thus the term, yo, that's deaf, definitely outdated now, but I like it still. Um, so yeah, kryptonite, cryptic subliminal materials that, can alter your mind. That was Superman's only weakness. And as far as I'm concerned, that's my only weakness, I'd be golden if it weren't for all these programs and subliminal message, AI, and stuff kind of ping pong. And my, literally, if somebody says a word that has multiple meanings, it really sucks to have in less than 1 second all of those meanings kind of happen. And then within milliseconds, it can turn your perception of that meaning into something else within another second. Like I said, and I'll go into a little in another part in this series, like, um, there's Planck time, which is like, I'm pretty sure is like the fastest your brain, or fastest measurement for speed and time. And the fact that your brain can, goes into that faster, better, faster, stronger kind of idea. And it's like, you can't get faster than Planck time, and our brains are literally computing this. I don't know how fast computers compute stuff within quantum physics or computing, but the fact that we can get the human brain to do that, turn the human brain into a computer, it is a good thing, but it's not something that we should be testing to overload or overstimulate, and then, like I said, turn people like me into crash dummies because we don't work, or because you're loners, or you're outsider to what's going on, or they view you as whatever, and you're disobeying whatever awful stuff they want you to do. And I don't think I said this, but basically, a major component that started, like the testing and like playing with people's minds, not even with drugs or anything like that, or designer drugs, mind altering drugs, was Wizard of Oz and Alice in Wonderland. So these were two films that had a huge part in shaping reality and changing people's interpretations and perspective of what was going on. And a lot of people have said this before. I don't know how was using MK Ultra or any of that kind of stuff. But I know it was used for experiments, and you can go look that up on your own. But I just thought it worth mentioning. But like I said, you look at the earlier shows, like Dick Van Dyke, or this show called Howdy Doody, the show of the shows. These are really early TV shows, and you can tell they're doing the body language, the gesturing of the eyes, which could be raising your eyebrows, blinking your left eye, blinking your right eye, looking to this side, looking to that side, turning your head, and all this type of body language that I'm going to get into. But they were doing that in the Dick Van Dyke Show, 100%. And Howdy Doody, it was like a variety show and had like an audience of kids in it, like one of those first kind of shows. You could see that the kids were doing it. And then, you kind of look out and you see that all these people in the world are doing this. And like I said, I don't know when it started happening, but once your mind is made aware, excuse me, of these connections, it will interpret it in a certain way. And if you are given association with this kind of subtleties, whether it's like the eye blinking or whatnot, you're going to get a association with them, and it's going to definitely impact. And basically these supercomputers, in addition to turning your eyes into cameras, which you can go look up, they had putting cameras into cat's eye in Russia, and definitely had it here. You can go search that. I mentioned that previously. But they had that. Then they went into human brains, obviously. Could have been happening at the same time that they made it public about the cat's eye, and turning that into a digital screen, or translating that into a digital screen, and then getting the picture even more clearer. Turning the human eye into a literal digital interface with a camera, like you see in Terminator, where you have words in front of your head, and so literally you could see somebody else's vision with your own eyeball, if you're connected on that level. I can only speculate on that, but I definitely think it's a high possibility that could be out there, or that people are testing that, or that's how some of these people do the psychic driving. They will psychic drive you in your in your hearing and in your head, but in addition to that, they could be seeing out of your eye, and it could be either eye. I don't know which eye, but you have a digital interface, and you literally connect through that person's vision. So not only can you influence their thoughts, you can influence what they're looking at. And they have the Raytheon Ravenclaw, which is basically a technology where it detects don't know what you call it, but it indicates where the eye is looking, and it can predict where the eye is going to be looking, and it will literally control that, as well as have the flutter of an eyelash. It can control that sensitive of something within your body. So yeah, like all that scary technology, like I said, there's stuff where, like, if I'm looking at a screen, it can literally track. It's an eye tracker, so that's like a basic version of what like the Raytheon Ravenclaw could do. But there are so many technologies like that. You just look at different eye tracking stuff, and kind of find your way around from there. Got Star Wars. Once again, that's like a trope of the good versus evil kind of thing, and the Star Wars, a war between stars, which would mean you're the light and the darkness, or like that's me reading into it. But I'm just saying, like, there are people, who want to control the world in different ways. So, obviously we're all kind of a part of the empire in some sick, sad way. But like I said, we got the resistance to that in whatever form it takes. Have invasion of the body snatchers. Like I said, people and programmers and AI can really program my body. It can do remote monitoring of chemical reactions, my heartbeat, my breathing, and it can literally control my motor functions. So if that's not someone literally coming into my body and controlling stuff, I can only speculate on how that's possible, but I know that's what's being done. Literally puppeting someone, animating the dead, like all those kind of tropes kind of are based around that reality that I've experienced and have had done to me, and I'm sure millions have as well. Two concepts, or two things. with X. Basically, X is people they exile, or X marks the spot for gold. Can be for 10 years, which is, like I said, going back into, um, I went from 17 to 27. Once again, that was 10 years. They say 17 is like, you're not an adult. So they say you're, a kid forever. And so that's why they exile you, because you don't adjust and comply with the world around you. But there's so many different tropes with X, like same with V. But we have X Files, which kind of, sci-fi show going with that kind of stuff. Also going with the alien trope. I've had it used to call me an alien. You go in Men in Black, that tracks alien life and make sure they're not doing anything. So anyone who's an experiment who gets monitored, like Men in Black, can be a connotation for that. It can be a different a context for that to read into that. But so you have X Files, and then there's this movie Rounders, where there's a scene where he has chips, and I'm just mentioning this because I remembered it since the first time I saw it after this started happening, where on the chips it said "Don't touch X," and it was a piece of tape that said that in marker. Um, so as far as what the subliminal meaning between that behind that is, I could only speculate. I'm not really going to go too much into it. But it's just this thing where nobody touches me, no one interacts with me, like to really like break the fourth wall of reality for me, or the real world. Um, so that's kind of like how this experiment goes. Like I said, they burn my town to the ground and everyone in it, but people go to follow script to torture me, yet they never interact in a real way. This goes to the past friends I had, my own family. You know what I mean? Sick, sad part of it. Um, so you have The Shining. Like I said, that has, the character, the kid in it who could read thoughts, and Jack Nicholson, whatever the guy's name was. He is Johnny. Yeah, there you go. They had him like going insane because he could hear his thoughts or interact with this hotel, which could go into a theme of like the prison that we're all in is the hotel, and Jack once again, in royalty, King and Queen Jack. It was in the playing cards. Um, Jack was kind of, they don't really ever tell you, right? He was a servant, he was a joker, he was a gesture, um, among other things. So if you go look up that in history, and then you tie the connections between John and Jack, they're derived from the same thing, and Jack was derived from John, I think it was. And so that's why you have so many, majority of movies have John or Jack as the protagonist or the main character, or the bad character. It's because of like the subliminal thing. So you make the connection between that, and it's like kind of like this homage to the Jack character, or the servant, or the John. Basically being a servant and being kind of like a joke, but having a place, and to give service, which goes to the modern day where we're all given marching orders. Um, so real quick with that. Um, like I said about Doctor Who, um, got the Twilight Zone, which like literally the concepts in that show will blow your mind. If you know what's going on and you can see how they translate. Can be to the Twilight Zone. Twilight's where you go when you finally wake up. So it's like coming to see the world for what it is. That's why, I can say, most people come to know this in some way. And the further you go, the worse it can go. But you can also be open to, basically it's like a catch-22 where the more knowledge you have, the more you know, and the richer you are with knowledge. Um, but at the same time, that's when these people kind of torture you more and more. And if you don't have a job or whatever, they'll, keep torturing you and all that kind of stuff. And the more that happens, the more confused you come, and you lose contact with life and what to do. And if you don't have friends or family behind you or anything to keep you going, it goes into the lack of motivation that comes with mental illness, depression, anxiety, and you're being tortured to literally have schizophrenia, like I said. Um, they can literally program you to get schizophrenia or bipolar, and that is true. So, not saying that I didn't have mental illness that kind of came from the subliminal messages organically, but literally like they would give me remote lobotomies and rewire my brain. So that, I went 2 years with being crazy, having thoughts in my head 100% of the time that I couldn't control, and that was mental illness. What you call it, I don't know, but yeah. So like they reprogrammed my mind, and then one day it just became silent, And I took like a dozen pills, never had any reactions to any of them that would make me feel like better or stuff like that. So literally, I don't take pills, I never got anything out of it. Um, so yeah, like literally, they reprogrammed my brain one day, and it was just clear, just like that. So, meanwhile, in the past 4 months, after over 8 years, they started torturing me in hospitals after 5 or 6 years. But since then, they've been torturing me worse and worse, and it got to the subliminal messages to interact with the gestures and body language and all the the eyes and flutters and stuff like that to make me go crazy, because they were definitely trying to kill me and torture me. They still are, and that's when I started getting hundreds of different gases, which I had been introduced to in the beginning, but got way worse. Um, so yeah, like lucky to be alive to say this, which is what has kept me going, is to do these videos, to say as much as I can, give my testimony, give the truth about these evil technologies, subliminal messages, the hive mind, the synthetic telepathy, the digital stuff, all this crazy sick stuff within the culture that's this hidden behind closed doors things, this unbalanced duality. Um, so uh, you have the Pentravit. Has Michael Myers. Never watched it, but in their logo they have the Masonic symbol, pretty much. And like I said, I'm just mentioning this so you can notice that they have like the compass, or like they have the triangle in so many shows, like in the title. If you see a title, if you've seen like the picture for the movie in the title, like there's so many times where there's a triangle, and there's literally always, it's not just National Treasure where they have like the all-seeing eye as a triangle in the words, of one of the letters. It happens so often. So just to make notice of that, because so many, do that. I know that's an obvious one for people who see this stuff, but it Carrie, where she pretty much like burns down school, that horror movie. In that, it was kind of like it was in the 80s, I believe, and so that kind of goes to like the clothing, which is the only reason why I'm bringing it up. Characters who were ridiculing, they had rainbow, a couple of the characters, they had rainbow clothing, and that kind of coalesces, like I said, with like the whole rainbow movement now with the LGBT and all this stuff, the connection with the liberals, and how they do a lot of this evil occult stuff, and like a lot of the stuff where they make jokes about, oh, I love the devil or Satan or whatever that. And like I said, with the Jesus Christ ritual, it's pretty much like a lot of the stuff in these shows. The cross will be like a symbol to stay strong, or to keep having faith, which keeps them using you for the ritual, because otherwise you kill yourself, right? So a lot of these people do kill themselves, go do whatever. But for me, I mean, um, I get a lot of strength from this. I get a lot of strength from everything I wear, and also symbology. What comes along with that, also with the torture, is they give you paranoia, and they give you superstition, which if you see a cross and it's like coming out of the ground, that could be death. So it also is used in that reverse way. And obviously, lots of cultures have superstition. So it embeds superstitions in you that you don't even have. You can have bad luck for the number 13. I never even believed that, and now I'm stuck with that superstition, because every time I see it, they give a bad connotation. Even though I have a grounded mindset when I go into this, you can't change what subliminal messages are saying. So on the same token with subliminal messages, you have Being John Malkovich in Get Out, which is kind of the same concept, where people can psychically drive you and control you. And that's literally what those movies are about. Get Out's about controlling black people, burying them deep in their subconscious, and and being John Malkovich, it's being John Malkovich. They are using him as a vessel, just like they're using me. The personal Jesus, personal scapegoat ritual, personal muse, whatever it is. So that's literally that. Clockwork Orange. That's where you have these hooligans on the street, and then they get literally programmed with like subliminal messages. So that one's not even subliminal. The theme and tropes right in it. Yeah, getting back to the like clothing thing. Carrie had the rainbow clothing in it as they were ridiculing her. Make her go crazy to burn down the school, and she was having all like telekinesis, all that kind of stuff. Which, like I said, aspects are real with the digital means and the signals and all that kind of stuff. Which we'll go into later, but it's basically like you can heal yourself with your mind's eyes light. And just kind of saying that real quick just so you can see what I mean by that. So another movie in the 80s was Electric Boogaloo. Never seen it, but I just saw a clip from it. And I noticed like they have the red and black military attire as they're like doing dances and stuff. So it shows you just like what they're trying to stand for and symbolize and stuff like that. So they have the rainbow clothing and the red and black clothing, and these are both kind of like showing pride and like a military kind of like a part of a tribe or a clan. Like those are colors for it. Like I said, you can have the red or the blue and gold, or the red and green, black and white, gold and silver. These are different parts of different tribes or different mentalities within the tribe. Just thought I'd get that out real quick. You have Silence of the Lambs, where the serial killer was ironically a Nazi, because everyone in the society is forced to be kind of like a Nazi, right? So he had like a swastika on his pillow. I just remembered that from years ago before I didn't ever watch it again. But just goes to show you like a lot of these people who become serial killers, like it's kind of like this tongue-in-cheek kind of thing as far as I'm concerned, as I see it. Like this guy knew how to do anything with people's minds, and then this guy was saying about this other serial killer who was doing all this crazy stuff, probably influenced by subliminal messages. Like that'd be the tongue-in-cheek part of it. You got Terminator, which I'm mentioning just because it goes back to the robotic guy. He was sent from the future, and like lots of people like can make the joke, there's tons of Terminators walking around in our world trying to get rid of anybody who's trying to tell the truth or do anything, and they have a mission to save people. And so just putting that out there. There's a show, movie, Idiocracy. I'm just mentioning for the theme of that. Is Truman Show, which is basically like a guy's being filmed 100% of the time, and he's looking how to get out. So like I said, for a lot of this, it can be like a positive experience when you get through all this. But if you're someone tortured like me, you're just sitting here wondering how to escape and how to get out of this situation and get out of jail or get out of this prison, or live how to learn, and learning how to live in this prison, knowing everyone's part of this prison, whether that's the hive mind or this new configured world. Through digital information and a complete surveillance state, or if you're, like I said, one of these people who's literally psychic driving people, or Terminator, you got Terminator eyes, where you have a digital interface on your eyes and you're seeing through the eyes of the dead. So, there's a show, Black Mirror, and this is like kind of like a newer version of the Twilight Zone, another sci-fi show. They have an episode, Entire History of You, where everyone has access to a memory implant that records everything humans do, see, and hear. There's an episode called Hotel Reverie, where they have synaptic fictive interfaces, which is stuff that I've experienced both of those. Another one called White Bear. They have a torture game where everyone is an actor for a show. And it's basically like this amusement park where they keep torturing someone over and over and over again, and then they put them to sleep, erase their memory, and they start the day again, which is once again what they do to torture victims. Joan is Awful is another episode. They have basically someone having their show putting their life into a show on TV. And there's aspects of that which kind of like go multi-layered. Um, but yeah, so basically, like, those are just a few episodes from that show, but it's like basically like that and the Twilight Zone. Everyone, um, every one of those episodes was kind of showing what was going on, or what had been going on, or what will come in the future. And I'm telling you, those episodes, um, those things are stuff that I experienced, stuff that exists in the real world, and that millions of people interact with and use in some sort of fashion. Um, as far as like having your life of the TV show, uh, goes on the concept of making your life into a movie for other people's attainment. Um, which I said, which is only a concept like, um, but I've seen it in music and movies so many times, like literally that for a song. Um, so, just goes into, are people watching through my eyes as a version of their TV? And since it's like the real, unadulterated truth, people tune into that. And there's like this joke about the news. I read the news, you know what I mean? The news of the real world that you'll never hear on the news. So I've seen that trope in other shows, or subliminal messages saying as much. Um, so it kind of end a little bit with the Matrix. The Matrix was basically, you think something's weird with the world, and then someone takes you out of it, and then wakes you up to, yeah, everything you said is real. And then that it was, once again, to go with the blue red ping pong kind of thing. You take the red pill, and you see how far the rabbit hole goes. You see how fucked up and controlled this world is, and how we're both basically living in a machine world, and have, all the stuff around us is this digital world, right? And then in the Matrix 4 that just came out a couple years ago, I don't really, it was, you could tell it was like this corny kind of rehashed of it, almost like the person didn't want to make the remake, which Matrix is one of my favorite movies. But in this one, like at the end, it also plays with that kind of red blue kind of concept. And at the end of the movie, you have like the machine. It was like a video game version of the Matrix in the real world. So it was like a multi-layered version of that. But at the end of it, it still had like the Matrix archetype. And so they had like the guy who had the red on him, or like the red eyes, whatever it was. He was the controller of the program in the Matrix. And this girl who had blue hair, she was the one fighting in the Matrix, and she was fighting against it. And so going to like this whole blue red thing, and who runs the Matrix, or these supercomputers. Like I said, I know it's the government. I know that liberals and Republicans are equally a part of this. They're equally patriots, behind closed doors. You'll never hear liberals really toting that as a fact, but they are, and they're all kind of doing this Nazi surveillance state, all giving these marching orders, all taking these marching orders. Hollywood is clearly a part of it. So, I think that goes into like when people start doing the espionage, like myself, who are trying to figure stuff out past, everything's fake and there's a narrative, like trying to break down everything, um, going into the politics side of stuff, right? And goes into the assassination attempt of Trump. It goes into Charlie Kirk's death. And like I said, he gave a subliminal gesture. And then it goes, like I said, into people who make these movies, knowing that people, Republicans are like the evil side, or they play the heel, and liberals are supposed to be the good guys. So they're gonna put a message into someone's head who doesn't know what's going on, and basically be like, "Oh yeah, the Republicans are always evil. You see them in culture, you should know, right?" And so like they're clearly the ones who control the Matrix, and it's like, no, these liberals, they love to, same as Republicans, they love to put up like this fake facade. And like I said, like a lot of the Republicans aren't one to really be like making jokes out of the Satanist stuff. And that's usually people that come from a liberal culture, a mainstream culture, like who actually join Satanist stuff, the Anton LaVey stuff, like actual Satanist some stuff. But anyone who makes jokes about that kind of stuff, or they make jokes about Christianity and Jesus Christ, like it's obviously from a liberal mindset. So you take all that into the fact, into facts, and factor that in, and then just like, the people that are doing this, that I've seen in my life, a lot of these liberals are psychic drivers as well as Republicans. And what I've seen from my personal experience is, any type of person, this is something I've experienced, will put gas into their car that has specific stuff to react with your DNA personally. And so I have people that literally cut in front of me who are driving a truck, and they will, go rum, rum, on their truck and just hit me with a bunch of gas and make me cough and gag and throw up, literally, So I've had that from trucks, I've had that from different cars. Well, my neighbors who have American flags, they literally came into my house. They rewired all the HVAC stuff, all the air, the cooling and heating, and all that kind of stuff, all the gas stuff, which is, put out by the state. You're not allowed to touch that. People have interfered and remodified that, and I'm pretty certain. I've had the piping changed, literally, and then literally I'd go there 2 weeks later. I have a picture of it on my phone. It literally changed from what it was, and I go and ask person I'm living with, my father, and he says, "Oh, I don't know." And it's just another aspect of this evil kind of stuff going on. And so, I'm pretty sure that that goes, straight to my neighbor's house, who literally have a compound, and straight to my neighbors across the street, who literally are all ex-military, and they literally move here just to do the technological side of stuff, as far as I can see it, or have some involvement. And both of these people, for months and months and months, had bulldozers, and all this stuff came into being years later. But so I know that they were doing construction, which is a concept that they create in your head. Oh, we're doing more construction, we're doing more ops, is what they mean. I've seen this from other torture victims online, which they never let me find again, unfortunately. But I do pray for those people, and I, hope they got back on the track, or, if they died, that I can tell a part of their story. And then the street across the street from me is Mason Place, and they get deliveries pretty much every single day. So I don't know if there's people doing more technological stuff down there, but so I just thought I'd paint that lovely picture for you. That's, used to have love thy neighbor, and now we have that. But, they both have American flags. They're both into that stuff. You have the government side of it and the Republican side of it. And, like I said, like, those people might be cheering for me as much as anybody else. I'm not painting them as a bad guy, but they are torturing and killing me. So, objectively, pure evil, you can only look at that so many ways, right? But anyway, so last movie, I'm gonna say by name, either for trope or just to mention something, is Back to the Future. And so going back into psychic driving and that kind of whole red, blue, ping pong kind of thing, a lot of this, stuff you see in the politics, without talking too much, you got the, like I said, like the rainbow stuff, the Black Lives Matter, all that kind of happened in the past 10 years. Also, what happened was they were calling all Republicans Nazis and all Republicans racists. And once again, like I said, you go to NASA, you go to MK Ultra, all these other things. Nazis, created different aspects of their programs and the mind control aspects. And that's in all departments of the government now, all department agencies, all that kind of stuff. So literally, once again, going to that tongue-in-cheek thing, but also the reality is our country is run or turned into a Nazi surveillance state. We have a self-policing Nazi community, where people's neighbors literally kill innocent people. People move into a town to burn that town to the ground. People in that town are all part of that psyop, can do nothing about it. So it's all talking about Nazi-esque stuff. But the car and to get back to it, the car in Back to the Future was, a DeLorean, right? So it went 88 miles per hour. And once we know, anyone who looks into that kind of stuff, 88 can be like a positive thing, just like the swastika could mean peace. And then there's 88 miles per hour, 88 meaning Heil Hitler, which is a thing that actual Nazis and neo-Nazi groups have been doing for quite some time after the World War II stuff. Um, so, Back to the Future, the car goes to 88 miles per hour. And if you look in our culture with the number 88, there are some people who will mean it for a positive meaning, which goes into like the numeric programming alongside the color programming and symbolic programming, with a cross or whatever symbol it may be. So Back to the Future, you had 88 miles per hour, and that was to go time travel, which is kind of, whether it was like, Masonic stuff for the government, they created subliminal messages. They created these simulations, which goes into live simulations, which I'm going to get into, and once you go through that, it's then time travel simulation, which is a show called Travelers, which kind of is riffing on that same kind of concept. And so basically, I'm a traveler, and to travel in time, you go 88 miles per hour, which is kind of like, as the way I see it, is kind of subliminal way of saying that this technology is based on like this Nazi like part of society, and that's how it came into being, kind of. But like I could go more on that, but I just want to bring that up. And also like Marty, the character in it, the protagonist who's doing the time traveling. He drove a red truck, or he was trying to get a red truck, and the reason why I bring that up is because, like I said, with this whole red, blue kind of thing, and trying to make red the bad guy. If you don't know what's going on, and you've seen a lot of TV, they will embed in your mind that there are so many shows and movies with a red car or something, and that goes into the psychic driving and the idea I think they want to get into, because like I said, I'm both I'm liberally minded, but I have Republican views. So it goes into basically how like they psychically drive Republicans. So that's why you see a lot of these mass shooters. A lot of them are going after minorities and stuff like that, or the right wing. And that's, like I said, like white males do more mass shootings, right? White males are more Republican. So it goes to show who they're trying to get rid of, because whether they're that or, conspiracy was a thing when I was growing up. And then they kind of catered to move all the conspiracy theories out of the mainstream when they were cleaning stuff up, and they move them all the right wing. So you have, radical people who notice the stuff about race, if they change stuff and they're not okay with it, the changing of the times and updating society, usually with all these kind of like progressive ideas and liberal ideas. And, obviously I don't go with some of them, but because I am so opinionated and care so much and I'm compassionate and honest, that makes me more of a target, because I want to tell the liberals, hey, why don't you guys look at conspiracy theories anymore like my generation did? And then of course you go into the Gen Z and the Zoomers, whatever you call them. They could be born with this hive mind control and not thinking and all of that stuff that comes with synthetic telepathy. Um, so yeah, just kind of bringing all that up, kind of, both sides are on control, both sides are torturing, killing people, but most of the Republicans who are insiders, they go with the flow. They are part of it, and like they still believe patriotism way more than liberals and doing that kind of evil stuff. So it definitely highlights the fact that they're more likely to do this stuff for the government and believe that they're keeping the country safe, rather than liberals who they would probably have to force to do it or whatever. Like I said, with Hollywood, like blue camouflaging as red, red camouflaging as blue. And a lot of in the Hollywood stuff and the subliminal stuff, you got the red carpet, the velvet rope, and a lot of time, like, they'll try and get you to believe that liberals are camouflaging as Republicans so they can blend in, and that's like part of like the trope and part of the joke and part of the subliminal stuff and the con. But a part of it is true, that liberals would probably not want to do this, but at the same time, they want to kill off anyone who's not going to go with the flow, because the flow and agenda is liberal based. So, regardless of my views, I get attacked when I want to make, the liberal views better and give back the Republicans a culture that they lost, and so that makes me even more of a target on top of all the other stuff, unfortunately. So just thought I'd get into that real quick. I might have to break this up into 2 videos. So yeah, I think I will do that, and this will be additional parts. I'm hoping to have this video series done in 8 parts, but this has already gone for over 2.5 hours, so I'll finish up this part with the actual subliminal gestures and programming and body language and dialogue and all that specific stuff in the next part, as well as a few more things on the actual structure of the matrix and how that works. So thanks for listening, watching, any of that kind of stuff. Take care.